Today's webinar is titled Panic, Sweat, and Cheers, Toastmasters and the Art of Public Speaking. Our presenter today is Stefanie Griffin, a longstanding member of the Rochester Daybreakers Toastmasters Club and the Assistant Director of Scholarships and Donor Reporting in RIT's Development and Alumni Relations Division. Stefanie has a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in Business Administration. She's been a member of the Rochester Daybreakers Toastmaster Club for 8 years and has served as both the club's Vice President of Membership and President. She's mentored new Toastmaster members to help them realize their strengths and challenge them to push themselves outside of their comfort zones. Stefanie also recently participated in a study as an expert to test whether nervous speakers could increase their communication skills by solely utilizing an online speech delivery and feedback platform. Stefanie's overall goal is to help people become more confident and effective communicators and leaders. We're thrilled to have Stefanie with us, so let's give her a warm welcome, and thanks for joining us, Stefanie. Let's get going.
Great. Thanks, Cindy, for the introduction. I've been in Toastmasters quite a while now, and I always get the same type of questions when people find out I'm in Toastmasters. They often ask, well, what is it? I've heard about it. What do you do at a Toastmasters meeting? And one of the questions that I didn't put up here that I often get asked is, wait, you don't like public speaking, but you pay to join a group and get up and speak in front of people. And that is the truth. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I joined and why Toastmasters is a fit for me in terms of my personal relationship with public speaking. So a little bit about Toastmasters in general. I'll start really high level about what Toastmasters International is and how it was created, and then I'll talk about what we do at a particular meeting. I think it's very interesting that even with technology and the internet, there's so many more ways to communicate with each other these days, that the original goal by Ralph Smedley, when he created it in over 100 years ago, the first meeting was in 1905, when he created it, he really wanted a place for people to come together to learn how to speak, to conduct meetings, to learn how to lead groups, work on committees together, because it was something that it's assumed that when you go into the workplace you know how to do that, but he found that it wasn't really always the case. His goal is really to help people become leaders and more effective communicators, because the two are so tied together. The more that you can effectively communicate, the better you can lead. In terms of how I personally describe Toastmasters, I look at it as a supportive place. I always call it a supportive place because most of the time people are coming to Toastmasters because they're not comfortable with public speaking and they need to go to a place where they'll be accepted, they're going to make mistakes, and they want to feel that it's a safe place to do that. I also call it a very fun way to challenge yourself. So if you have a fear that you're trying to get over, the best way to do that is to make it a fun and interesting way to do that. And I have a couple of slides later on where I'll talk about all of the things that I've learned in Toastmasters. When you think about it, if you go to 2 Toastmasters meetings a month, for example, and you hear from 3 different speakers at every meeting, you're going to learn 3 different things that day from the speeches that you've heard. And you learn something new at every meeting. I've found that the longer I'm in Toastmasters, it's also a way to give back to people. So the longer I'm in, I realize how lucky I am to have had such a supportive environment over the last 8 years in my growth in public speaking, that I want to do that for other people. And so I've started mentoring new members, and I really want to help people, especially people who have a big fear of it. I so appreciate and I give them kudos for joining something that puts them in front of people talking when it's something that's so outside of their comfort zone. And then this last piece here, I didn't come up with this phrase. A fellow club member of mine described Toastmasters as a safe place to fail. And I think that's a perfect way to put it, because if you don't like speaking in front of people, you don't want to have that first experience in front of your boss or in front of your colleagues, but instead in Toastmasters you can go there, not do so well, and still get constructive feedback on how to do a little bit better next time. One of the things that I would like to know, I'm going to have 2 polls in a row here. I'd like to figure out where people on the webinar are coming from in terms of how often they have to present, how often they have to be involved in public speaking events, and what their comfort level with it is. So If you could answer the poll, I'll go through some of these options. And I'd like to know, how often do you have to do one or more of these things? You might have to give a formal presentation, whether it's for work or a community activity. You might have to give a toast at a wedding or present an award to somebody. You might have to give a reading at a church. And something that people don't often think of as communication, but it's such a big part of Toastmasters, is leadership. So do you have to lead meetings? Do you have to lead teams of people or lead a project? Do you have to speak at meetings? And I don't mean in the sense that you're up giving a presentation. This is just if you're in a meeting with 10 other people, for example, at work, and you have something to say and you have to speak up at that meeting with your input. Do you have to give a webinar often? This is my first experience giving a webinar, so that's a check on my list. Do you have to participate in an interview, whether you're being interviewed or giving the interview, or perform a workplace evaluation? So in the poll, the options are never, occasionally, weekly, and daily. So I think it will be interesting to find out where most of the people are coming from in terms of what they have to do. So the poll results show that nobody replied never, which means that at some point, all of us have to engage in some type of speaking or leadership. Most people fell, 43%, actually it's pretty close, fell in the occasionally section. 40% were weekly, they have to do something like this, and 13% were daily. So 13% of the people in this call engage in this type of leadership or activity on a daily basis. So to follow up on that, I'm curious to know next, what is your comfort with public speaking? So you have to do it, and we know a lot of people have to do it either occasionally or weekly, but now how comfortable are you with it? I was reading an article in Forbes magazine, and they broke the fear of public speaking down into 3 sections. There's 3 types of people. There are the people like the guy in the left here, who he looks completely comfortable in front of the crowd. He's loving it. He likes being the center of attention. He's having a good time, and this is natural for him. Then you have the person on the right who doesn't want to get out of bed, and it's the Grim Reaper summoning this person to do a public speaking engagement. Then you have where the bulk of us fall, are 80% of people fall in the middle in terms of their comfort. So this guy's up at the podium, he's got a red face, he's sweating, and he's obviously not comfortable, but he's up there doing it. So I think it will help in terms of what we talk about in the webinar to find out where people are at. Are you in the 10% on the left of really comfortable? Are you 10% not this, you have glossophobia, meaning you do not like to get up and do this, or do you have to get up and do it, even though you don't prefer to do it? And I'll tell you in a little bit where I fall in this group and kind of how Toastmasters has helped me in that journey. And one of the things that Toastmasters says is that every Toastmasters journey starts with a single speech. And so I'll talk about, where I started and where I feel I'm at now. So very expectedly, most of the people in the webinar fall in the middle category. So 10% of you said you're very comfortable, which ironically is exactly what the article said. That's about 10% of people respond that they're very comfortable doing it. Most of you, 63%, will do it if you have to, but you don't prefer to do it. You may not volunteer to do it. And 20% of you, it's one of your biggest fears. So I think that's very helpful as we go along. And Toastmasters, I want to say this too, Toastmasters is for everybody. So it doesn't matter where you fall on that scale. If you're the most comfortable person up there or the least comfortable person, there's always something for you to learn and to grow at in Toastmasters. So it's really impossible to talk about something like Toastmasters without making it personal, because really communication and our relationship with communication is a very personal thing. So it makes sense for me to share a little bit about my history with public speaking. And I put these 2 little pictures up on the screen because that's how I feel when it comes to speaking. I think it's important for people to know that this is not something that is very natural to me. I do not like being the center of attention. I don't like to be the person that everyone is looking at. I don't like to get up and do public speaking engagements. But it's something that I don't want to hold me back in life. I don't want to cost myself opportunities because it's not something I'm comfortable with. So that's why something like Toastmasters is a great fit for somebody like me who can do it, but it's really not what they prefer to do. I think it's also a surprise for people to learn that about me, because generally in day-to-day life, I'm very social, I'm conversational, and I engage with other people, and they're usually surprised to find out that I'm actually an introvert, and on any given day, I'd prefer to be at home rather than out in a social setting. So I think that's one thing that is interesting, because a lot of people that have a fear about public speaking, they think that everybody can see their nervousness. They think that everybody can see that they don't like to do it and that they're not comfortable. But the truth is, most of the time, you're the only one that knows how uncomfortable you are. And most other people do not see you that way, and they see you as somebody who is comfortable speaking. What got me started in Toastmasters specifically, like why I went out to look for a club, is about 10 to 12 years ago, the employer that I was working at, they would pretty consistently tell me on my annual reviews that I don't speak up enough. They could tell that I had things to contribute at meetings, and they could see it on my face that I might have input or an opinion, but I wouldn't feel confident enough to say anything, and I might say something afterwards just to my director, you know, without being in front of the group, or I might not say anything at all. So it pretty consistently came up in my reviews, and again, I didn't want that to hold me back, especially when I did have feedback I wanted to offer. So that is what got me started on my Toastmasters journey. So here's the thing, with Toastmasters, there's over 350,000 members across the globe. It's an international organization, and there are over 16,000 clubs. I know that life gets busy. There's kids, there's work, there's school, there's community engagements, there's extracurricular activities. But with over 16,000 clubs to choose from, there's really no excuse not to be able to find one that works for you. And I'll tell you, when I was looking for mine, in the Rochester area alone, there are over 30 different Daybreakers, or 30 different Toastmasters clubs, which is perfect because you might prefer nighttime, you might prefer Saturday morning, you might prefer Sunday evening. I went to 5 different clubs before I found the one that worked for me. And I think that's one of the most important first steps if you're interested or thinking about joining a Toastmasters club. Go to a bunch of different ones near you and find the one that you're most comfortable with. Some of the ones that I went to were very, very informal. And for me, they were a little too informal. I wanted to get some professional development and some personal development out of it. So I was looking for a little more formal. But then I went to one that was so formal that you could not attend unless you were in business attire. You had to dress in a business suit to attend that meeting, and it's 3 hours long, and it's every Wednesday night, every week. So that was a big commitment. I found one called Daybreakers. It's the only morning club in Rochester. And I think this says a lot about the feeling and environment of the club when I say that I am not a morning person. I've been in the club for 8 years, and I'm pretty much late every week, and people know that. And I still am in that club because I love it. It was the best fit for me. It's so warm and friendly, and within 5 minutes of getting there, we're already laughing and enjoying each other's company. And that, to me, was crucial because it felt like a place where I could get up in front of people and address my fears. In terms of how a Toastmasters club is designed, the Toastmasters International has really done a good job of developing a meeting structure that allows almost at every opportunity for leadership and communication skills growth. Mostly when people think of Toastmasters, they think strictly of communication, and you're going to get up and do a formal presentation. And that is one part of the meeting, but there are so many other parts of the meeting where you can become more comfortable speaking in front of people and that you can take on leadership roles as well. That's one of the things that I have found as a surprise in Toastmasters. I expected, and I joined just for the purpose of getting to be a better speaker, but I've actually found that I'm more comfortable in leadership roles as a result of being in Toastmasters because somebody needs to lead the meeting. Somebody needs to set the tone, and if it's my turn to do that week, I have to get up and do that. And the more I've done it, the more comfortable I am getting up and leading a team of people. So there are three main sections to a Toastmasters meeting. And the first one, the most obvious and kind of the meat of the meeting, is prepared speeches. So in our particular club, everyone's a little bit different. We have 3 speeches at every meeting, so we're an hour and a half. If you find a club that meets for an hour, you might have 2 speeches. And in the case of that 3-hour meeting that I tested years ago, that one had several. I think it had 6 or 7 speeches every meeting. Most Toastmasters speeches are between 5 and 7 minutes. And the great thing about Toastmasters is you can speak about anything that you want to talk about. So you'll have restrictions on what skill you're supposed to develop in that particular speech, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but you can pick whatever you'd like to talk on. Now, the leadership component of that is that section of the meeting must be led by somebody, so that person is called the Toastmaster. And if you're assigned to be the Toastmaster for the week, it is your job ahead of time to reach out to everybody, to confirm that people will be there for their roles, that they'll be prepared. You create the agenda for the meeting. And one of the things that we do that I really like is we have a theme at each meeting. So sometimes the themes are related to what's going on around us. I think our last meeting theme was Groundhog Day, which, because it was so close to Groundhog Day, we had people do research on it, and we learned a little bit about the history of Groundhog Day. And as the Toastmaster, when it's your job to introduce the speaker and welcome them up to the lectern, you introduce them with something relative to this theme. And I think that's important because if you're ever in a situation where you're at a seminar or you're doing a very public presentation and you have to welcome somebody up to the podium, you don't just say, here's Bob. You say, you get some background on him, and you introduce Bob, and you talk about his credentials or his history or a funny story. And so you learn to do that as a Toastmaster. You also cover the goals of the speech that the presenter is presenting on. So if it's their icebreaker speech, which is the very first speech a Toastmaster does, you would say that so the audience knows where this person is in their Toastmasters journey. What's so nice about this is that it really gets you comfortable. If you have to prepare for meetings at work, you learn at Toastmasters how to do all of this work ahead of time and what's involved. And the first time I was Toastmaster, I remember it, I was so nervous because you set the tone for the meeting, and if you start off and you're just staring at your sheet and you're nervous, that's really not the tone you want to set. I remember being so nervous, but I've done it so many times now that I'm comfortable doing it and getting up and maybe making a joke about it or learning something interesting about the theme of the day is a nice way to break everybody into the morning and get started for the meeting. So this is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of what I've learned at Toastmasters from other people's speeches. It's interesting because we have had graduate students who have come to our club and joined as members because they know they're going to have to defend their dissertation someday. And so they come to us to learn how to practice it, and while they're doing that, they'll give presentations on what they're studying as a grad student. So we had one student come in and talk about how the eye processes images and how it processes color and all of the things that it takes in and how it connects to your brain. Very interesting. We had another woman who English was her second language, so that's why she joined Toastmasters. She wanted to practice communicating, and she now actually goes all over the world and speaks because she's a leading expert in, I couldn't even tell you about what she does, but it's relating to the heart, and she would give so many presentations to us on how the heart functions and different ways to help the heart through different operations and procedures. We have learned about we had somebody who had to give a humorous speech, so he got up and he talked about how to be the best mediocre dancer on the dance floor. And it was fun because this is somebody who is not comfortable speaking, but he wanted to challenge himself. So he would talk about the dance move, and then he would actually demonstrate it for us, which is always entertaining to watch. And kudos to him for getting up there and doing that. We've had people talk about their most embarrassing moments in life, which, when it's not you, it's always fun to hear that. And we've had people give folk tales. We've had people do storytelling. That's one of the manuals that people work from in Toastmasters, and that's always really interesting. Somebody gave a presentation on earth shifts, which I learned about, and then again, you know, laser energetics. One woman in our club worked with electron microscopes, which I have no idea. I would never have been introduced to what that is until she gave a presentation on it. So I talk about this because if you're going to get up and do something that you're not comfortable with it is such a fun environment to go, and at the end of the day, you've learned all these interesting things. One of the things that can seem overwhelming when you first join Toastmasters is that you know you're going to have to give a number of speeches. Maybe over the next year you're going to have to give a certain number of speeches, and you think, well, what am I going to talk about? I think especially for people who, if it's a fear of theirs, they might devalue, or they might look at their life and say, well, what do I have that I could talk about that other people would be interested? I remember I thought like that too, and I didn't know what I had that I could teach other people, or what opinions that I had I could share with others. And eventually I've learned it's anything. It could be something you wanted to research for a long time, and now here's an opportunity to give a speech on it. So some of the things that I've talked about are things that are either opinions of mine or things that have happened to me. For example, I love to paint at my house. And the last speech I did was the one on tips and tricks for painting like a pro. And it's funny because I never thought anything of it. I paint all the time. But one night I was thinking, well, what can I speak on? I had to do a demonstration speech. That was the manual that I was working out of at the time. So I had to get up in front and demonstrate to people a procedure or a process. And I thought, you know what? If I count up the number of times I've painted rooms in my house in the last 10 years, I've learned some things in that time. And I actually counted it up, and I had repainted rooms in my house 24 different times in 10 years. So I've learned some things, and I got up and I came with the brushes that I like, and the bucket that I like, and the type of tape that I use. So that was something that is a simple thing in my life, but other people walked away and thought, oh my gosh, I've learned these tips that I didn't know before. Another one that I gave was I do a lot of selling on Craigslist. So I talked about Craigslist, and there were people in the audience that knew it as well as I did, and some who weren't comfortable with it. So they learned some things. Working at RIT, I know a little bit of ASL, and I don't know a lot, but I know that I know more than most of the people in my Toastmasters club. So I gave a speech on ASL, and it was audience participation. They got to learn some as well. I think it's also important that people realize you shouldn't stay away from controversial topics, especially if we're in a club to help us grow our communication skills. We need to be able to talk about things that we disagree on, because if we don't talk about them, we'll just continue further disagreeing on them and not finding a place in the middle. So I've had a couple of speeches about things that I'm passionate about, and I've given a speech about my father, who had to go on a health care plan a couple years ago on the marketplace when he had to switch plans, and his experience with that. And I had a certain opinion, and I knew some people in the audience would disagree with me and some people would agree. I also talked about access to birth controls in our school in one of my speeches, which again, that's one of those controversial topics, but as long as you do it professionally and respectfully, I think it's good to learn how to present on things that you know people are going to disagree with you on, so that you can come to some sort of discussion. So the next part of a Toastmasters meeting, which is also a lot of fun because it's impromptu speaking. It's off the cuff. You have to come up with a response right away. There's no way to prepare for it. This section is called Table Topics, and each club may do it a little bit differently. Generally, at our club, we'll have somebody who is the Table Topics master, so they lead that section of the meeting, and they have to come up with 3 or 4 questions ahead of time related to the theme of the day. And they'll ask a question, and in our club, it's not the same in every club. In our club, they'll ask for a volunteer to answer that question. And it's interesting because this is often a point in the meeting where you hear crickets. Nobody wants to put their hand up because they can't think of anything to talk about that quickly. So if you don't volunteer, you might be volunteered. But it's fun because you have to think of something off the top of your head. And what some of the Table Topics masters do in my club, in Daybreakers, which is very interesting, and it's fun to do something different and not have every meeting be the same, they'll change it up. So for example, last week we had the table topics master. She brought in a bag, she called it a little bag of tricks, and we couldn't see, it was a black bag, we couldn't see what was in it, and she would ask for 3 people to come up, and you'd put your hand in and you'd reach in the bag and you'd grab something out, and you had to talk about whatever it was that you had grabbed out of the bag. So in the first round, we had actually here I have a picture on the next page. In the first round, these people right here, they grabbed leprechaun hats. So they all had to be leprechauns, and the audience, the other members of the club, would ask them questions, and they had to give the most convincing answer as a leprechaun. And it sounds kind of goofy, but it's improv, and it's a way to get people up and out of their comfort zone, which is the point of why we're all there. So they did that round, and then she asked for 3 more people for the next round, and then she was on to the last round and asked for 3 more people. 2 people volunteered, and I can tell you that improv is not in my comfort zone. I am not comfortable at being funny under pressure, so I did not raise my hand. But this woman named Marta, who I get along with really well in the club, she said out loud to the club, she said, well, I think the person who arrived last should be the person to go up front. And of course, everybody knows that's me. So I smile outwardly, and inwardly I'm thinking I'm going to unfriend Marta on Facebook as soon as I can. But I go up to the front of the room, and I pull out of the bag a tiny little guitar. It's like a foot long. And the other 2 speakers pull out other little instruments as well, and the audience asks us questions. Like, how did we get into playing the guitar? Have we played for anybody famous? It was our most embarrassing experience on the stage. So you really have to make it up on the spot. And I didn't enjoy it at the time because I'm thinking, I'm up here and I'm not funny, I'm not good at this. But at the end of the meeting, you have to vote on who you thought did the best job at answering the question and making it seem like they were a real musician with their fake instrument. And that picture up in the left is me holding my little guitar because I was voted the best instrument person up there. And I mention that because that's an example of, I wouldn't have volunteered to do that, but because somebody volunteered me to do it, I got up there, I got out of my comfort zone, and people recognized that what I did was actually entertaining, even though in my head the whole time I was not thinking that's how it was going. But that's how table topics go. You are presented with all different types of experiences, and you have to learn how to respond on the fly, because a lot of times we'll have to do that in a work environment. The last part of the meeting, and this is actually one of the sections that I like the most, and that's evaluation. So at our meeting, and not every meeting does it this way, but if you get up and give a speech, at the end of that speech, there's about 1 to 2 minutes where everybody in the club, in the audience, will fill out a half sheet of paper and give you specific feedback on how you did. Could you have added more vocal variety? Could you have added more body language? Was the purpose of your speech not really clear? So you'll get feedback as a presenter. You'll get feedback from everybody in the room, but you are assigned one specific person ahead of time to provide feedback to you verbally at the end of the meeting. So if you're assigned to be an evaluator, you talk to your speaker the night before and ask them what speech are they working on, what are the goals of the speech, do you have any personal goals that you'd like to work on, and then at the meeting you listen to their speech. You have about 30 minutes or so to collect your thoughts, write down what you want to say on paper, and then go up and deliver about a 2 to 3 minute verbal evaluation. And one of the things that you have to learn in Toastmasters is I don't like the word criticism, and I don't like the word critical. You want to be encouraging and constructive. You want to provide a positive place for feedback so that the person feels that their strengths were acknowledged, as well as things that they could work on for next time. This portion of the meeting is led by a chief evaluator. So again, if you're in the leadership role, you're learning how to introduce people up to the lectern and run that portion of the meeting. Now, if you're an evaluator, you really learn to master the compliment sandwich. And many of you may know this out there, some of this may be new. I remember I was talking with my sister a couple months ago and I mentioned the compliment sandwich, and she had no idea what I was talking about. And if you look at a sandwich, or if you look at an Oreo and there's 3 layers, you want to start off with encouraging compliments. If I'm giving an evaluation, I want to say, oh, Cindy, the topic that you chose to talk about was so appropriate to the goals of your speech today, and I was interested from the very moment you started talking. So you want to start with something positive. And then in the middle, that's where you want to provide your feedback, and you might say, I think that you could have taken the left turn and moved it to the side, because really it was kind of inhibiting your ability to move around the room a little bit. So I think that's something that you could work on for next time. And then you want to close with something positive and encouraging again. And that's just part of the supportive environment at Toastmasters. So I've been talking about these manuals, and what are they? So if you become a member in Toastmasters, you're given a competent communication manual and a competent leadership manual. And in each manual, there's different projects that you have to complete. So in the communication one, you are tasked, there's 10 speeches, and you're tasked in each of the speeches to work on a different skill. The first speech that you'll give is an icebreaker, just getting up. It's 4 to 6 minutes and learning to be comfortable in front of an audience. And really, that's when the audience gets to see what strengths you already bring to the table as a speaker. Even though you may think you don't have any, there's a lot of new members that we get at the club who say, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I don't want to do this. And they get up there, and you listen to them, and you think, wow, that was really good, because they know how nervous they are. We don't see it. And then after that, you work on different skills like how to properly organize your speech, which it may sound, again, like a simple thing, but you want to make sure your audience is in no doubt of what message you're trying to get across. So you want to get feedback on what type of wording and how you can organize what you're saying in such a way that there's no doubt to what you're trying to say. Vocal variety is very important. There's a speech where you want to pick a topic that gives you an opportunity to go up and down in your voice, and maybe lower your voice a little bit to bring the audience in, or have a big booming voice so that people in the back can hear you very clearly. There's speech number 5 is body language, and that one's pretty clear. We all know that body language is a huge part of any presentation that we give, and it's a bigger part of the presentation than the actual words that we say. So you want to pick something that you can use, you can practice being comfortable being up in front of people and using your body to get your message across. And then we move on to different ones after that, like speaking to persuade. The last speech in the competent communication manual is speak to inspire. That's a hard one. That is one where you really should be looking back on all of the skills that you've developed and pulling them all in for that last speech. I remember we had a woman a couple years ago who she left the club because she had a different position, and it didn't work with her schedule. But when she started, you could tell she was visibly nervous, and it was hard for her to get up there and talk in front of people. And she pushed herself, and you could see that she put the effort and the time in. And her last speech was actually the Speak to Inspire speech. And she got up and she talked about her struggle with depression, and how even when she joined the club, she was still trying to get out of that part of her life. And she did such a fantastic job, and you knew it was so personal that people in our club, in the audience, in our room, had tears, because we knew her and we never knew that she was fighting this, and she talked about it so eloquently, and we knew she had come so far. On the right-hand side, those are some examples of once you do that first manual, you can move on to advanced communication manuals, and you can work on more specific things. So there's one speech that's just for special occasions, and that is getting up and giving a toast, presenting an award to somebody. Those are usually 2 to 3 minute speeches. Then there's one on public relations. We had one of our longtime members do a speech from the public relations manual a couple weeks ago. I was the Toastmaster that day, and he said, before I come up and speak, you have to tell the audience that the point of this speech is to speak on something controversial and speak on something that you know that the audience would have a completely different opinion than you as the presenter. And that's part of public relations. If you're going to have that type of job or be in that role, you're not always going to have a friendly, engaging, supportive audience. You're going to have people who don't like what you have to say. And so Toastmasters is a great opportunity to practice those types of speeches. At the same time, you get leadership manual, and this is very basic. So in the meeting, every role in the meeting is an opportunity to practice leadership, whether it's being Toastmaster, which is the biggest role, and leading the meeting, or whether it's being chief evaluator or the table topics master, whether it's being just an evaluator and getting up there and speaking. We also have people that watch for timing, which is very important actually, because if you have to speak at work or if you have to speak at a convention or a seminar, you're given a certain time frame, and we want to make sure that you choose your words carefully so that when you get up there you don't run 20 minutes over, that you run right on time where you need to be. So at the same time that you're working on your communication skills, you're also working on leadership skills in every meeting. Okay, so some things I've learned over the years being in Toastmasters, and I think practice is the biggest thing, and that's why I love this quote: you only need to practice on the days that you eat, because you always should be practicing. And I can tell from personal experience, there have been some speeches that I have not practiced, and I knew I had to do it. My life got busy, I put it together the night before, and I got up and did it the next morning, and my feedback both reflects that that people could tell I didn't put the practice in. And personally, I got much less out of that experience because I didn't put the work in ahead of time. So practice is the #1 thing, and that's going to make you more and more comfortable the more you get up there and do it. And if you practice, you'll feel prepared, and you'll have kind of trained yourself to get up there and do it in a way that you've practiced, you know, the day before and the weeks before. If you're new to Toastmasters, if you join a club, I think it's a good idea to commit to completing a certain number of speeches at the beginning of your journey. So, for example, it's easy for people to come in, they do the first couple speeches, and they think, okay, I've got this. I'm good. I don't need to do another speech for a little while now. And then they kind of rest on their laurels for a little bit, and they don't really sign up for another speaking engagement because they've gotten comfortable, because they've gotten over that first hurdle of joining the club. But when you join, tell your mentor, if you are assigned a mentor, or tell the vice president of education, who in our clubs is the one who assigns all of the roles at the meeting, tell them, hey, I would like to complete my first 4 speeches in, you know, the next 6 months. And they'll get you on the calendar if they can. And that way, you know you're committing to working on at least 4 different speech skills over a certain amount of time, instead of getting comfortable and letting time lapse. So if you are, I'm stuck in #3. I'm not stuck, but I find myself in #3 a lot, which is once you start to get comfortable, you have to make a conscious effort to get uncomfortable again. Because that means you've plateaued. You've gotten to a point where you're comfortable at this type of presenting, but if you really want to be better and push yourself, you have to get yourself on the schedule to speak, and you have to pick some speeches that are going to be tricky and uncomfortable for you. And I know for me, I have been, you know, as I've been putting this webinar together, I've been evaluating where I am in Toastmasters, and I think I'm at a point right now where I'm comfortable. And I don't want to be comfortable. I should be a little uncomfortable. I should be challenged. And so the next speech I give should really push me in the things that I need to do more of in my speeches. For people who are also in that middle category of people who aren't comfortable but they get up there and do it, I would say when you write and when you practice your speech, practice and write it exactly as you want to deliver it. So, for example, if you're writing, if you're one of those people who writes it down word for word, write in the word pause where you want to have a pause. Write in the word if you want to look around the room. Write in parentheses between the 2 sentences, put look around the room. Because that way, when you're home practicing it that way, and you start to train your brain to, okay, I know at the end of this sentence I have to look around the room or I have to insert a pause, when you get up there to do it in front of everybody, you won't have to remind yourself to do it. It will be part of the way you practice your speech. If you want to walk around the room a little bit more, if you want to get more comfortable, because a lot of times when we're nervous, you know, we put our hands close to our body and we tend to stay in one spot and our feet might shuffle from side to side a little. But really, moving around a little bit gives you an opportunity to expend that nervous energy a little bit. So as you're practicing your speech, I'll do this. I practice in my bedroom. People I live with hear me practicing my speech in my room, and I'll practice in front of the mirror, and I'll make sure I'm walking around, and then I'm doing it the way I want to do it on the day of. Number 5, this is for people who are more advanced, because people new to Toastmasters may not feel comfortable taping their speeches. But actually, once you get more comfortable and more advanced at public speaking, it is such a big advantage to tape your speech. And then I said after that, it's one thing to tape it, it's another thing to watch it. So you have to watch it. Nobody likes watching themselves. We're uncomfortable. We criticize the way we look or how our voice sounds. Get over that after the first 5 seconds. And here's my recommendation, and this is what I did when I participated in that study last summer to help people who were nervous help increase their public speaking skills. When you watch the tape of your speech, watch it as an audience member. So don't sit there and critique yourself. Watch it as somebody from the outside watching you deliver a speech. And just take the whole thing in. Just, listen to your voice, how you use the room, and just consider it holistically. Then, the next time you watch it again, and put it on mute. And watch how your facial animation, like if you know at a specific line in a speech that you say, I am so passionate about so-and-so, but if your face doesn't say that you're passionate, if your facial animation does not reflect that, that looks disingenuous to the audience. So watching it on mute is an opportunity to see if your facial animation and your body language are in alignment with the message that you're verbally saying. And so I think that's a second way to watch the speech. And then a third way to watch it is actually to turn the tape on, but don't look at your screen. So if I'm watching it on my laptop, I'll turn it on, but then I'll put my laptop screen down so I can't see it. And then I'm just listening to the words that I'm saying. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, can I make this better? Is the words that I'm saying, can they have more impact if I say them a different way? So if you're somebody who's really comfortable at public speaking, and you want to get up and do an even better job and think about how you can get to the next level, look at all of the different ways you do speaking. And there's a bunch of different numbers out there, but there's a number out there right now that says 93% of your presentation is nonverbal, meaning that 55% of it comes from your body language, and the other 38%, I think it is, comes from facial animation. So that's a huge percentage that's not coming from your words. So that, if you want to get better and you want to get to that next level, look at all aspects of your speech. The next thing I would say, and the last thing, is just pay it forward. Mentoring I have found so enjoyable, and I found that it reinvigorates my enjoyment and why I joined Toastmasters, because I'm helping somebody new get over their discomfort. At the same time I'm doing that, I'm reinforcing with them positive things to do and things that they could work on. And I'm also reminding myself things that I can do the next time I have to do a presentation. So I'll tell you, where has this gotten me? I've been in Toastmasters for 8 years now, going on 9. And I once had employers tell me that I didn't speak up at meetings, and I work on Cindy's team, who introduced me at the meeting or at the beginning. And I think she could probably tell you, I speak up when I have something to say, and if I have an opinion, I share it. I do it professionally and respectfully, but I don't shy away from getting up and talking at a meeting, which is something that I struggled to do 10 years ago. I had a situation 2 years ago at work where I was on a team of 3 people, and one of my teammates was out on maternity leave. The other one had, unfortunately, emergency medical leave. And 3 days after she went out on emergency medical leave, she was supposed to deliver a speech to a subcommittee of the Board of Trustees. And her boss, the Associate Vice President of the department, came and asked me, well, you know the content matter, will you give this speech to the Board of Trustees? My first thought was, I don't really want to do that, to be honest. I didn't say that, but my first thought was, that's not comfortable for me. My second thought was, I don't think I can really say no in this situation. And my third thought, to be honest, 100% honest, was, I'm so glad I'm in Toastmasters, because I felt like I was prepared and capable, and I'd been training and practicing to get up there and do that. I've learned over the years what your strengths are, because we're easy to critique ourselves and be hard on ourselves and think that we have so many things to improve on. But when you get up there consistently and talk in front of people, you get consistent reinforcement back from people what you do well. And I've learned that I can do humor well in a speech, which I never thought I could do 10 years ago. And I really like evaluating. I like being encouraging and helping people get to the next level in their journey. So that's where I'm at now, and that's what Toastmasters has done for me. And I really encourage you to check out a couple meetings, see what you think, and find one that works for you.
Wow, I'm impressed. Stefanie is on my team, as she acknowledged, and this was great information. So actually, there is a question that has come in from Sandy, but anyone else who has questions, please submit them to the chat box. I think this slide actually answers a part of Sandy's question. Her question was, how do I find a club near me? And it looks like you go to Toastmasters.org and click the Find a Club button.
Yep, exactly. It's really easy. You just go find a club. You can put in your zip code, and you can put in how many miles you're willing to go, and it'll pull all of the clubs in your area.
Okay, so Sandy also was questioning and acknowledging it might be different by region or club, but how often are meetings generally, and what's the cost?
Sure. So it really is different, and that depends on which club you go to. We meet twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month if there's a 5th Thursday. Some clubs meet weekly, some meet for an hour, and some meet for 3 hours. So that really can differ widely, and that's just based on your time and where you go. In terms of cost, I can tell you in the Rochester area, our membership is broken down into 2 things. So I pay $108 a year to be part of Toastmasters, and when you break that down at least 2 meetings a month for 12 months of the year, I think I get more than my money's worth out of it. Out of that $108, $90 of it goes to Toastmasters International to pay for their programming, all of the manuals, all of the support that they provide, and the additional $18 goes towards my club. So we can purchase things, and a good example of that is last year we purchased a video camera and a stand so that we can start to tape our members' speeches. So that's where that additional money comes from. What I don't know is if that amount changes if you went to California or some cities that have a higher cost of living. I don't know if that $90 changes a little bit or if it's $90 anywhere you go with Toastmasters International.
Okay, one other logistical question, and then we have another couple that have come in. Is participation expected the first time you go to a meeting?
Okay, so that's also a good question. So if you're a new member, and again, every club is going to be a little different, but really people understand that you are not required to participate. So when we have guests come in, we'll ask at the end of the meeting, you know, what their thoughts were on the meeting, if they thought it was something they'd be interested in, but they don't even have to answer that. And sometimes people say, I have appreciated being here, I don't feel like speaking at this time. So it's not required. And when I talked earlier about how, you know, I was volunteered last week or last meeting to go up and participate in table topics, that's because I've been in the club for 8 years and people know me and we can pick on each other. But we don't do that with new members.
Okay. Christopher wants to know, you didn't touch on this, but, or maybe you did and we're not quite sure, but can you review just briefly, like, eye contact and why it's probably important?
So eye contact, I think, is one of the things that as you're practicing your speech, you want to get that into your practice. So I remember when I was in a public speaking class in college, the instructor of the class used to sit in the back of the room, and he would do certain things while you were speaking to indicate that you have to work on that habit. And one of the things that he would do is, if you're looking right at him, he would look around the room, and that was your signal, that was our signal as the speaker to indicate that I can't be looking just at one person, I have to be looking at everybody. And we have a person in our club who is an advanced speaker. He's been in the club for 10 or 12 years, and he is really good at, when he's trying to make a point, he will have prolonged eye contact, not uncomfortably long eye contact, but he won't just kind of look at everybody and, you know, at the same amount. If he's trying to make a point, he'll pinpoint one person in the audience and deliver that point to them. And there's really different ways that you can use eye contact to help with the impact of your speech.
Okay, some more questions have come in. Hope wants to know, if you're asked to speak impromptu, does the material have to be accurate or is it judged mainly on delivery?
Well, it's actually mostly stories. So you're not asked, so for example, we always have a theme of the day, and sometimes we have very random themes, and I think, who came up with this theme? We had a theme of the day on Jell-O, and I thought it was going to be the weirdest. It actually ended up being one of the most fun meetings we had because people had to talk about these kind of random things. So when we had table topics, it would be like, talk about a memory that you have, you know, associated with Jell-O, or have you ever been to the Jell-O Museum, which is here in Rochester. So for the table topics, it's generally not factual, it's really just getting up there and how well did you do thinking on your feet and presenting something coherent in a minute or two.
Okay, thank you. Christy wants to know, for her, most of her meetings are on the phone via conference calls. Does Toastmaster address that pause and talking over issue that happens with conference calls?
So actually, Christy, I'm glad you mentioned that because this is something I didn't touch upon. But right now, the traditional education program is the manuals that I mentioned earlier. But Toastmasters is rolling out a new program called Pathways, and it's really taking Toastmasters into how we speak today, which includes more webinars, it'll include more blogging, it'll include podcasts. And they have videos that they can offer on those specific skills that address what, if you did a webinar or if you're doing a podcast, what type of certain scenarios would you come across, such as that delay, and then give you hints on how to address it and how to overcome it and how to practice knowing that that might be an issue. So that is something that's coming, and I think it'll be great because the traditional program is more person-to-person speaking, whereas Pathways is going to offer new opportunities for people to practice how they might do it in their day-to-day work life.
Great. Matthew has a question. His question is, I am deaf and would like to practice my speech within Toastmasters. Does Toastmasters provide ASL interpreter in order for me to be part of this organization?
Matthew, that is a great question. I am not actually sure. We've not had anybody in the particular club that I'm in need an interpreter. So I think that's a question I can actually ask and maybe follow up with afterwards, but we haven't had that question come up before, so I wouldn't want to give you an answer that was inaccurate. But I know that especially in Rochester, there's probably a big need for that, and there's so many clubs here. So that's a great question.
Matthew, why don't you send your email address privately to the host, and Stephanie or I will follow up with you, later today, tomorrow, as soon as we can get more information. Let's see, a couple of other questions. Earlier on, Stephanie, you talked about Toastmasters is a safe and friendly space. But what if you're in a situation where it might not be as friendly or safe? How does Toastmasters help you to prepare for those types of situations?
Oh, you mean if you're going to be speaking and you want to practice speaking in an environment that's not going to be as friendly as Toastmasters? Yeah, so that's actually one of the things that we've talked about and we want to incorporate more in our meetings. Because, for example, in our meetings, when I'm up there speaking and I'm looking out at the audience, it's generally a room of friendly faces looking back at me. But that's not always the case. If I have to get up and give a presentation, even at work, they might not be smiling back at me, or if I have to give a presentation where they're not going to be as friendly. So we've actually started, as odd as it seems, we've started practicing where we've advised the audience members in the club or, the other club members when somebody is giving a speech and they want to practice giving it in front of an audience that might not be as friendly, that the audience should reflect that, and their body language should reflect maybe that they have crossed arms or that we don't welcome that person up to the podium as we usually would. So we do incorporate that practice into our speeches because that will help you when you're actually doing that one outside of Toastmasters.
Fantastic. Another question came in from Hope. How do you overcome an accent that is different from the norm? Has that ever been covered in your club?
Well, we've had several people come through our particular club because it's attached with a local academic institution, and a lot of graduate students come and have different accents. And we kind of get it out in the open in the beginning, and she'll talk about, we have one student right now, her name is Hung Ying, and she'll say, this is what I want to practice working on. These particular words are tricky for me, or words that sound like this, and I need to know, because it might be uncomfortable if that's not addressed. It might be uncomfortable for us as audience members to say, oh, I couldn't understand you, or I didn't really know what you were saying, but she wants to hear that and she needs to hear that feedback. So we always tell people to be upfront with what they're looking to get out of Toastmasters, and in many cases when we've had people with English as a second language and they have a strong accent, that they want to know what we can't understand, and so they can work on that for next time.
Fantastic. Let's do one more, or maybe two. Stage fright. How do you personally, Stephanie, overcome stage fright, or do you even have stage fright anymore?
Oh, I do have stage fright. So I'll be honest. This is a webinar. You're not even looking at me. You don't see me. But I was very nervous about doing this webinar. I mean, beforehand, my heart was beating faster than it normally does. I was getting dry mouth before the webinar. And I've been in Toastmasters for 8 years. So some people can get past that, but some people, you just have to accept that that is what my body is telling me to do because it's uncomfortable, but what I know I'm capable of doing is more than that. So my approach to stage fright, which I have had, it's really not comfortable for me to get up and do that. It's just a matter of getting up and doing it, and that's, everyone may have a different reply, but my reply to that is to practice a lot, practice in front of people, practice in front of your family. If you have a mentor or somebody at the club, practice in front of them. And when you get up there and do it in front of people, if, like I said with that girl earlier, if you forget your lines for 20 seconds, it's okay because you're up there doing it, and that's the most important thing. And 6 speeches later, you're going to be more comfortable than you were for that first speech.
Okay, last question for Stefanie from Rob. How do I overcome a tendency to say and
Okay, so every club has a different way to address this. For example, most clubs have somebody that's called an account or a grammarian, and that person is looking out for filler words, so ahs and ums, but also connector words. I have a tendency to say and so. I don't finish, I finish a sentence, but then I want to connect it to the next one, and so we did this. So what we do is we have the account or grammarian counts throughout the meeting how many times somebody says or ah, or uses one of the connector words. Or they also pay attention to really unique ways that somebody used a word in a positive way. So what we do is we report on that at the end of the meeting. We did have somebody come to our club who came from another Toastmasters club, and at that club, they had a bell, like a bell that you would see at a hotel, you know, you ding it on the counter, and every time somebody would say ah or they would ding the bell. We tried that. We thought it was pretty interruptive if you're getting out there and you're giving a speech, and in the middle of your speech you hear a loud ding, and it kind of throws you off in your speech a little bit. But every place has a different way to do it, but that is something that we pay attention to.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's all the time we have now. Thank you to all of you for joining. If you do have additional questions, please email them to ritalum@rit.edu, and I will get answers from Stefanie, and I will communicate those back to you via email. Many thanks to Stefanie for being our presenter today. I think we've enjoyed hearing more about Toastmasters and public speaking, and she's provided some really great tips. So hopefully that's been of help and service to all of you. Please consider joining us on Wednesday, February 28th for Digital Self-Defense, Tips, Tools, and Best Practices to Stay Safe Online with RIT alumnus Ben Wolk. In this webinar, Ben will discuss the tips, tools, and best practices that will help you enjoy the Internet more safely, whether you're using personal computer, smartphone, or tablet. Your invitation to that will be coming to you via email very shortly. Again, thanks to everyone for joining. Thanks to Stefanie for being our presenter. Please exit this webinar by closing your WebEx browser, and when you do, please consider taking the very brief and optional webinar survey and tell us how we did today. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.